how would you describe the local economy during this pandemic of the area that you cover?
Well, we're pretty much following along with the state and the nation. We lost a huge amount of jobs in April and had a fairly quick recovery coming back in May and June. We lost somewhere around 30% of the jobs in the economy during April. And over the past couple of months, we've gained back somewhere around 30 to 40%. So, we still have a long way to go to get back to where we were before COVID. But it's kind of nice to see that quick rebound. We're not sure how it's going to go going forward. A lot of economists think it's going to slow down because, a lot of the restrictions that could be taken off are taken off now, and we're kind of getting into a new normal.
So looking ahead to the fall and the school year, with focusing on bus drivers, they've got a tough job to begin with. The pay isn't, great. The hours probably aren't great. And you throw this pandemic into it. So at the tail end of last school year, everyone went virtual almost, immediately in an emergency type situation. And now it's kind of unknown what the school year will look like this year as far as in person or, how long it'll be virtual. So what has the impact been like for bus drivers?
Well, we don't have employment data for before the COVID-19 restrictions were put in place. Before COVID-19, the industry that employs school bus drivers had been growing. It added 250 jobs in Oregon to reach about 5,800 jobs. Now, this is in the spring before COVID restrictions. Obviously, with schools shutting down in April, it's likely that the bus drivers were experiencing layoffs in April and May. If we look at the unemployment insurance data, about 5,000 people were collecting unemployment insurance benefits in Oregon in the sector that includes bus drivers, and that's transportation and warehousing. So it's likely that a good portion of those 5,000 are school bus drivers.
Wow. So that number you said earlier, the 5,800, that's specifically school bus drivers in Oregon?
That's the industry that employs school bus drivers, and the majority of those employees are school bus drivers. Some of them are going to be administration.
Okay. And so they were adding jobs in that sector leading up to the pandemic, which, so the sector was expanding. That's obviously good news. And then all of a sudden you have this pandemic just knock the lights out on pretty much everything. In this case, we're talking about school and transportation. So you would think more people potentially out of a job because more people were getting hired, and then all of a sudden it all goes away.
Right. As I said, the industry had been growing. In Oregon, it added 250 jobs over the past 5 years. And, we made 5,800 in the spring before the pandemic restrictions were put in place. If we look at the unemployment insurance data, the sector that includes school bus drivers, that's transportation and warehousing, had about 5,000 people collecting benefits statewide. And it's likely that a good portion of those are school bus drivers.
What do you foresee happening in the fall as far as these school bus drivers go?
It all depends it all depends upon how the schools are going to handle this. And as far as I can tell right now, all that is up in the air. If they're going to practice social distancing and have school buses, they might actually need more to transport the kiddos to school. But if they're going to do mostly online or have staggered, they might need less school bus drivers. It really depends on the disease right now and how restrictions are going to be put in place going forward. Eventually we're going to be able to get back to in-class schoolrooms. And these jobs will come back to some extent, but it's hard to say how much.
From an economic perspective, some districts are trying to keep as many bus drivers on staff as they can, even as they try to figure out what school will look like. Is that viable in the long run, though? I mean, they've had, some bus drivers transporting meals or, just doing any sort of transportation within their respective school districts. Obviously, that's not how the system is set up for them. So is this something that these districts can afford to do long term?
Well, it makes sense to try and keep experienced school bus drivers. It's a very responsible type of job, and knowing the person and knowing what kind of job they can do is really important in that kind of position. So it makes sense to try and keep experienced people. How they're going to be able to do that, whether government assistance can help with that, it's hard to say at this point.
So there are thousands potentially of school bus drivers around the state wondering when they'll return to work in some respect, let alone bus kids to and from school. Do you see us getting back to normal? Do you see them getting back into their buses in the next several months? Or do you think it could be something that we don't see getting back to usual until after a vaccine?
Well, at this point, all of that's up in the air. It's looking like some school districts are going to be able to have some in-class schooling going on. Others are going to be predominantly video learning. So it's all up in the air right now. It looks like there will be some need for school bus drivers in the next few months. But I think that we're going to have to get past the pandemic before a lot of school bus drivers are hired back.
Money-wise, what kind of long-term effects will we see focusing in on the transportation aspect of schools with all of these day-to-day changes and unknowns? It seems like it would be tough to keep your budget balanced if you're a school district, when you plan so far in advance for a normal type of year. But when you're having to make all these on-the-fly switches and changes and move money around and try to keep bus drivers on staff and all of this stuff, I mean, how long can a district survive like this?
Yeah, I really don't know about local school districts at their budgets. We're going to need public schools going forward. So, I'm not sure if it's government assistance or how we're going to work that out. It's really not my bailiwick.
Right. And I mean, I guess generally speaking, from your, economic expertise, will school districts come out of this unfazed, or in this case, I guess if we also want to zoom down specifically to school bus drivers and transportation systems within school districts, economically speaking, do you think that eventually they'll make it out of this okay economically, or is this something that, they'll be hurting from for a while?
Well, yeah, we're all going to be hurting to some extent from the pandemic for a while. But again, we are going to have public schools going forward. That's something that's included in the state budget. So it's up to the disease at this point and how we deal with it and how restrictions are applied. And right now, a lot of that is still up in the air for the coming school year.
I mean, I go back to that number you said earlier, 5,000 roughly in the transportation sector of school districts around the state. That's a huge number.
Right. There are a lot of school bus drivers around the state. And right now their short-term future is uncertain in a lot of cases.